Hello, Revere, and welcome to another great Revere Veterans and Community Show. Today I have a special guest. His name is Lou Spagnola, and he's going to be running as a Northeast Regional Vocational School candidate. Lou, welcome to the Revere Veterans and Community Show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you.
Well, thanks, Morris. It's an honor to be here, and as always, I'd like to thank you for your service for this country.
Right, thank you. Tell us a little about yourself before we get into the questions.
Well, my name is Lou Spagnola. I'm a lifelong Revere resident, and I also was a student at Northeast Vocational. I graduated in 1986, and I took graphic communications, and I went straight into the industry where I have worked continuously. And throughout that time, not only was I in the industry, but I actually taught for 5 years at Northeast.
And what did you teach at Northeast, if I may ask you?
Graphic communications, which is printing, but printing can be a little outdated, so it's more about, if you think about it, print media.
Could you just give us an example, since we don't have anything? Like if you were looking at this thing, would that
Yes.
come off?
Yeah, like somebody, in other words, somebody would have to lay that out. It has to be centered. You'd have to pick the typeface. You'd have to pick the size. There's a logo there. You have the background. So, when you think about it, there's a lot that goes into it. Some of it's design. Some of it's knowing the page layout. And, we used to teach the kids that. And
Before I get into the questions, and I do have a load, and I got some, by the way, off the computer for you. People want to know about you, too.
Very good.
So, tell us a little. You were a teacher, and you taught printing.
Yes.
For how many years?
5.
5 years. Okay. Now, what makes you running for the vocational school committee, if I may ask you?
Well, as always, we could do a better job. And I think what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to make it clear of why we need change and why we need to constantly push the boundaries of, let's not just be complacent. Let's not just keep things the same because we don't like change. We have to embrace change, and we have to embrace doing a better job and representing Revere in the 12 communities that go there as well, with, the best possible ideas.
Wait a while, you say representing Revere and the 12 communities? You mean you've got to represent 13 communities?
Well, here's the thing, and there's no way around this.
I'm confused.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and unconfuse you and everybody else. Here's a fact. Now, we're having an election. I'm running for a seat in Revere, okay, for a school in Wakefield, and I can get votes from all 12 communities. Okay, now, if you'd like me to list them, there's Revere, Winthrop, Chelsea, Malden, Saugus, Melrose, Wakefield, Woburn, Winchester, Reading, North Reading, and Stoneham. All 12 communities can vote for all 12 races. Now, you ask me, well, Lou, you're running for a Revere seat, so what are you going to do for the people of Stoneham? Well,
what are you going to do for the people of Winchester? Never mind, that's a very wealthy town.
Exactly. Well, you know something? The fact of the matter is, Northeast School Committee, it needs representation to the 12 cities and towns. And we'll talk about it, but you can't have it so that you're running for a seat in Revere and you have to worry that you could get the most votes in Revere and still lose the election because you don't get enough from the other 11 communities.
So, okay. Now, why is vocational high school great?
Well, let's face it, there are so many different learning styles. And so, I'll tell you something. Me, I wasn't much of a classroom student, and I'm still not. But here's the thing. If you leave me a pile of tools and a pile of parts, I can put it together because that's my skill set is with hands. And not everything at a vocational school is hands-on. But the thing is, they talk about a high school. They say regular high school. And the fact is, all high schools are regular. All right? Northeast, it's a wonderful school. And myself and many others have gone into their trades. Auto mechanics, welders, cosmetologists, dental assistants. It's wonderful in giving kids a career. Now, you could go to Revere High, and maybe you think, okay, well, I don't have any vocational skills. You could go to Revere High, and then you go over to Wentworth and take construction, and that's perfectly fine. Or if you know you want to get into construction, you go to Northeast and you take carpentry. And then you follow it up with an education or an apprenticeship. But vocational education is wonderful because it gives kids that maybe don't know what they want to do. They get to experience all of these different career paths, and they can go out and say, well, I want to try carpentry. Well, gee, I didn't like carpentry. Wow, welding, I loved it. Or HVAC.
I have a good thing for you. I typed in a bunch of questions that I told people if they wanted that have to do students or teachers or whoever. I don't know what this gentleman means, but he says to talk about what happened to $2 million. Do you know anything about that?
What's that, the Revere educational budget?
I guess so.
Well, Revere had to, let's face it, there's not a lot of money out there, It's one tree and we're all picking from it, right? The theoretical money tree that we're going to pick from. You can't just say, well, I'm going to rob from Peter to pay Paul. And then I'm going to, what? What am I going to pay back with? Well, Revere, they've had to make some tough cuts. Mayor Arrigo came in and he had, let's face it, he had to slash the budget. The money's got to come somewhere. I know the Revere School Committee's not going to be happy about that because they have to make do with what they have, and they have to make do now with $2 million less. All right, and
is that what that $2 million figure?
Well, yeah, I think it was closer to $1.8 million, but regardless, what it comes down to is there are tough cuts that have to be made. Now, a school like Northeast, they have a formula. They just get what they get. You have somebody showing up saying, "Give me the money," and Revere school systems, all these schools you have, and Northeast is one school.
Lou, I got a good question for you.
Sure.
People that live in Winchester, which is a fairly wealthy town,
yeah.
And let's say people that live in Chelsea, which is not such a wealthy town, when they send their kids to vocational school, is the money that normally would have been paid in Chelsea the same as Winchester would have been paid? In other words, they have to pay the vocational school. Is the amounts the same, or
no?
They're not?
No. There's a system in place. It's an antiquated system, and it has to do with property value. But for instance, Saugus. All right, Saugus, I believe, pays the most money per student, and that's because Route 1. Every time you build something on Route 1, like for instance, they built the Walmart. Well, when they built Walmart, the cost per kid went up, and so now what you have is a system in place where, let's face it, Winchester is a homey, nice little town that doesn't have major development going through it. It has a nice little downtown area. It's got a nice little pond with ducks, and it's a beautiful place to live. But the property value, even though it's going to cost you $750,000 to buy a house, and in Chelsea it's probably going to cost you $250,000. All right. Now I'm not exactly sure of all the per town city amounts, but I do know Revere, I believe, sends the most amount of kids.
All right. How many kids do go to the?
It's about 1350 total, and that's coming from 12 communities. All right. It's a big amount. I'm sure it's on par with Revere High, based on the amount
Excuse me.
from each community that gets sent.
The reason I got to ask you this question is a vocational school, anything like a so-called charter, similar to a charter school?
No, Northeast, it's a public high school.
It is?
Yeah, charter schools run off different, it's a different...
Right. The reason I mentioned that, someone told me, I don't know if this is true, that on a charter school you can have a licensed teachers. Can you also have that at a vocational school?
Well, you can at Northeast because...
What do you mean? Is the state allows that?
Well, let's face it. It's a troubling thing to me because I earned my license. I went out, I did the classes.
Right.
I did all the criteria that needed to be done, and I got my license. Okay, and that they give you a provisional license, or preliminary it's called, and you have to work 3 years at a school, and then you get your professional license. But to me, it's troubling to think that a school would go through the, motions of posting a job and then hire someone that hasn't met the minimum criteria. Because to me, that says either the person's inexperienced or they haven't taken the time to do what needs to be done. And I don't think personally that is the best hire for the kids or for the school.
When a person gets out of college and goes to teach, he is not licensed yet. Is that correct?
No, and the thing is with vocational teaching, see, now here's the thing. I was in the printing industry. At the time I entered teaching, for 25 years, I worked in the printing industry. And I had been a manager of a company. I had been a pressman. I did customer service. I worked in billing. So for me to go in to teach in that industry, I had already had a lifetime of experience, hard experiences of, learning, trial and error. But what ends up happening is you don't have to go to college per se to be a vocational teacher, because your experience is your education. But you do have to take classes. There's 7 courses you need to take that teach you how to teach. Okay, and to think that somebody that's unlicensed hasn't taken those classes, how are you going to make a curriculum? How are you going to reach the back of the classroom? Because any teacher out there that's watching this is going to say, well, right on. You can't just stand at the blackboard and do it, talk, because that's a demonstration. That's not teaching.
Right.
You have to find a way. You have 20 kids in your class, and you might have 20 different learning styles. So in order to reach 20 different learning styles, you need 35 different ways to present that material over the course of the student time in that school, because they might not get the lesson you taught them. They might not get it for 2 years. And then the light bulb goes off and they say, Mr. Spag, I see what you meant. And that's the most beautiful thing. When a student tells you that, that's when you know, not that you're a competent teacher, because I don't know of a competent teacher, right? All teachers will always say, I'm almost there. I feel like I'm getting better. It's a hard job.
Right, here's something. This gentleman says here to ask you this question. I got to do it, but I don't know what it means. He says, ask him what are the 2 types of people. Does he mean male and female to go to school when he says what are the 2 types of people?
The 2 types of people, I think he's alluding to when I said there are 2 types of people who run for office. Okay?
Oh, okay, maybe that's what he meant. Go ahead.
And usually what it comes down to, there's 2 types of people out there, actually. Only one of them runs for office. There are 2 types of people. One complains, and then the other decides to do something about it. And, I'm like anybody else. I'll stand up and complain, but at the end of the day, I am going to dig my shovel into the ground, and I'm going to do something about it. And I want to see things get better, and if it takes me standing up and doing something, then that's me. I'm the second type. I'm going to do something.
Right. Now, there's a certain thing called life experience that you just talked on before. So if a person wants to teach plumbing, let's say, and he's been a plumber, licensed plumber, or he wouldn't be an unlicensed plumber.
Oh, right. Yeah. You figure a master plumber has already gone through the trials of getting...
So he would be qualified to teach at the Northeast Regional?
No. See, you're licensed at your job, you're experienced at your job, but what you need is the license to teach, and that means you've taken these courses that teach
What
you
do
how
these
to
courses
teach.
consist of? Just give us an example, if you may.
Okay, there's a curriculum class. Like, for instance, they teach you how to build a curriculum. And when you think about a curriculum, I'll give you an example. Like with math, for instance. If you're going to teach 5th graders math, you don't just throw a book at them and say, well, here's a math book, we're going to go through it. It's all steps. We're going to start with addition, we're going to do subtraction, then we're going to work how they work together. Then we're going to do division and multiplication, and we're going to show how the 4 of them work together. Then we're going to get into some other things, because the building blocks. And so to build a curriculum, the aim is to get the kids to learn something, but not just a skill, like I'm going to teach you how to do that. See, what they do, it's one of those things. It's like the Karate Kid, the wax on, wax off. He didn't teach him karate. He taught him skills that were related to karate, so that when it came to teaching him karate, the guy had himself a really great foundation. Now, if I was going to teach somebody how to do this, I would teach the foundation, some things that have nothing to do with that. Like I would talk about measuring. We'd talk about color. And we'd talk about design. So that then when we get into laying this out, they have a foundation under them. So a curriculum course to teach a person how to lay that out and that's not something that a teacher gets right away. I taught for 5 years, and I can tell you that at the end of 5 years, I had a long way to go. It's a lifetime it takes to make a great teacher.
I can see that. Now, since there's only 1,300 kids in the vocational school, And do they have a limit how many can get in there to begin with?
Yeah, because I mean,
Is 1,300 the max there?
yeah, but you know what? That building was not made for 1,300 kids. I can tell you that. That's the type of thing that, and I'm sure you'd say the same about all schools and buildings. We do what we do. We push the envelope, and you want to bring more kids in, and the plus is, let's face it, expanding citizens in the citizen base in all of these cities and towns. You got to send them somewhere.
Okay, I'm a kid. I just got out of elementary school. We call public school, where I used to come from. I want to go to high school. Then I pick a vocational school. Do my grades have to be at a certain level, or anybody can go to the vocational?
Anybody can apply. It's open to application, but you have to have the grades, you have to have the attendance, and you can have gotten suspended multiple times, because it's a system that all works together, that if you have good grades and good attendance, but you've been suspended 2-3 times, then that might keep you from going. Or if you have perfect attendance and you've never been in trouble and your grades aren't all that great, you might still not get in. So it's one of those kind of things that you have to really, it's not that you have to be the so-called cream of the crop, but you really need to be, the attendance has to be there, the grades have to be there, and obviously can't get in trouble.
You mentioned before about complaining, but also, what do parents ever complain too?
Well, I have to. I'm very, very shocked by the amount that when I announced my candidacy, I put up a page. I had a website, and I put up a page on Facebook, and I couldn't believe the parents that came out. They were calling me. They got my number from friends, saying, "You have to help me." And I tried to help everyone by pointing them in the right direction. But I'm thinking, I haven't even been elected, so how can I do anything? But it didn't mean I didn't try and offer them the best advice I could. But I'm horrified by some of the things that I've heard from parents about that place. And, it kind of goes with the fact that, I'm going to say this, and it's the truth, nobody's minding the store, because they don't hire the best candidates up there. And that's for everything. That's for superintendent, that's for principal, that's for guidance. They hand these jobs out to friends and family of school committee members. You cannot operate that way. This is not City Hall. This is a high school. And I think if you want to talk about, we want to do the best for the kids, we want to put the kids first, well, then bring them the best administrators. Bring them people with vision, people with ideas for how to make a better school. Because here's the thing. You talked about vocational school. There's no competition. You can't send your kids to Shawsheen or Middle of America school. You know what I'm saying? You can't just pick a voc. You live in Revere, you go to Northeast. Now, the only way you can go to another school is if Northeast doesn't offer that curriculum. Now, you're an 8th grader, your father was in masonry, and you want to learn masonry, you want to do bricklaying, you want to lay concrete. Northeast doesn't offer it, but Whittier up in Haverhill does. So there's something called choice that you can go there instead, and Revere has to pay for it, just like they pay for Northeast. All right, but Northeast doesn't get that money. Whittier gets the money. So that's the whole thing here. It's, you have one vocational school. We need to make that vocational school work for Revere. And that's what I am mostly passionate about, is the programs they've closed up there, and it's the lack of vision that the superintendent has consistently overlooked.
Here's a question for you. Since you're running for the school committee, how many people are on the ballots besides you, if I may ask?
You mean for Revere or for all of them?
All of them.
Okay, the Revere, there's just one. I'm running against the incumbent. He's been in office for 32 years now, and he's been running unopposed for a long time. So I'm the first person to run against him in I don't know how long. There's also 11 other races. There's a total of 12, because there's 12 cities and towns, so it's one per community, and so total of 12.
Now, can you go around to the other towns like Winchester or Saugus and ask their television studios to put you on the air so you can speak to their people there? Because sometimes this may not get over there.
Well, honestly, I've met with some reluctance, and I'm gonna explain. In my opinion, the reluctance is because nobody seems to know about this school. Now, our tax dollars pay for it, but it seems like I did a survey, and there's another guy that's running for the Malden race, a friend of mine. He did a survey. I did mine in Melrose, okay, and
And what were the results, Lou?
I did 100 people, and
Pretty good.
8 out of 100 knew that Northeast existed.
8?
8.
That's 8%.
Yeah. 92 taxpayers from Melrose did not know that Northeast existed. So when you have that going against you, naturally TV studios and newspapers, they're going to be, what, Northeast? So I've spent the last 6 months really doing my best to educate the public that this school exists, it's important, and it can no longer be overlooked by the public. We really need to get on board. And, to talk about the $2 million that Revere had to slash from their educational budget, well, what that means is you have to do more with less. And to talk about a vocational school, right now, vocational school is extremely important. Now, I can say this, nobody wants to get older. But the fact is, the baby boomers, that generation, they're retiring. And that was a great generation for this country, for the building and the construction. We need kids to go into that. We need kids to say, gee, I want to build bridges. I want to build highways. I want to build skyscrapers. I want to be a part of making my city as great as it can be. And we need to really push that agenda that, I'm not saying you can't get there from going to Revere High, because you absolutely can. And I personally would never tell a student, don't go to Revere High, go to Northeast, all right? Because you can find greatness at Revere High, because that might be the path you need to take. You can also find it at Northeast, because that might be the path you need to take.
I would like to interject something. Of
Yes.
all the schools in the whole country, of all the superintendents in the whole country, Revere came out number one.
Yeah.
Paul Dakin, one of the best superintendents in the United States, and Revere High School, one of the best schools in the United States.
Absolutely, and that's something that, when you look at that kind of thing, and you ask, well, is it good to go to school in Revere? Yeah, absolutely. It's great to go to school in
I'd
Revere.
be proud if I had more kids, but at my age, it's a little hard.
Well, you know what though? The thing is, there's nothing. There's no one size fits all. You can't just take every kid and send them to vocational school. You can't take every kid and send them to a city high school. I think there is something out there, and obviously it comes into play. Try and get into the head of a 12-year-old and say, okay, a couple of years you're going to be going to high school. We need to send you where it's going to be perfect for you. Well, what's perfect? You take a student that's 15, and they might not be the same student at 15 and a half. Something clicks, and then they say, wow, this is serious. I found something I love. Or maybe they decide all of a sudden they don't want to do what they picked. So, there's a trial and error. Try to steer them in the right direction, but give them the choices that are going to make a difference. And that's why I love vocational education and why I really wanted to be a part of this.
Lou, we got about 4 minutes left, so I want you to take 3 minutes. But I got a question for you, and this is something we discussed about. I'm not familiar with the school system meetings. You mentioned two things to me, transparency and executive session. Some people may not know that, but you do. Would you tell us about that?
Well, in order to have, you talk about a high school now. A high school is not City Hall. You have a school committee meeting. It needs to be televised. It needs to be recorded. And I think every important issue needs to be spoken about in that meeting. Not have a 15-minute meeting and then go have coffee, and then let's talk about the most important issues in executive session when the public's not allowed. I understand executive session for a Revere City Hall meeting where there's things that need to be talked about in private. I don't understand it for a high school that is doing their best to keep things from the public. Because why would the meetings not be televised? And,
Well, we do televise our public school meetings.
Revere does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Northeast does not. Never have. They don't record them. They don't put anything out there to let people know. I think they hang it outside the front door. It's not like they advertise it. And then the budget isn't posted. If you ask for the budget, you get a song and a dance because they don't have it printed. The minutes for the school committee meeting, it's not like they publish them. Now, that's one of the things. If I were to get elected, you better believe that all that stuff is going to be publicized. Not to mention the fact that I want to do a column for the Revere Journal. I will do once a month, and I'll let you know what's going on at Northeast, because that's the way to get everybody on board with what vocational education can do.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
We had some very hot weather this summer there. How was the air conditioning? Because some schools had a problem with that. Was Northeast, well, they got the people to fix it there, I think.
Well, I can tell you that the superintendent's office is air conditioned, and I can tell you that the administrator's offices are air conditioned, and I can tell you that the shops.
What about the students?
No, it's hot in there. It's a 40-year-old building. It's falling apart, and it's sad.
Okay, Lou, we have a minute and a half left. I want you to leave me about 20 seconds, and you can wrap it up.
Well, as I stated, vocational education is extremely important. And I'm fighting an uphill race because we have ourselves a school in Wakefield. I would be running for a seat in Revere, and I have to get the word across to 12 cities and towns. It's a daunting task, but I believe that we're on the right side here. I believe my heart's in the right place, and I cannot see a problem with wanting transparency in a school, in any school. I think that the public needs to be aware completely of everything that's going on, every facet. Furthermore, I don't know why the schools don't do more, this school particularly, why they don't do more to put out what's going on in there. And I would like to see things like that, because I think Revere students could really benefit. There are a lot of students that don't go to Northeast because they don't know enough about it. They don't know enough about vocational education, and it's extremely important. Now, I have until November 8th. It's a big election. We're going to elect a president, and we're also going to elect another school committee for Northeast. And I really, really want to see improvements made at that school.
Right, Lou, and I want to say it was an honor to have you come up here. I want to say thank you and I wish you the best of luck and God bless you on your journey.
Thank you, sir.
There.
Much
Thank you very
appreciated.
much. God bless our troops who are serving in the military at home and abroad. God bless the people of Revere, but most of all, God bless our great country, the United States of America. And Lou, I want every school to keep the pledge in the schools.
100% I agree with you there.
Right, and thank you.